It's a beautiful day at South Padre Island. People are flocking to the beach to escape the summer heat. The skies are blue, the sun is bright, temperatures are sizzling. By all appearances, it's a gorgeous day. You would never guess that a deadly storm could be forming out past the horizon, but one could be.
If there was a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico, then we would most definitely have heard about it, either on our local television station or on the radio. But 150 years ago, things were different. There were no satellites, televisions, or radios to warn people of a hurricane. They had to learn to read the signs of an approaching storm. The telltale north wind in summer and the changes in movement of the ocean's waves and swells. These were clear indications that a storm was out there, but no one knew how strong a storm would be or exactly where it was going. Without the technology needed to predict a hurricane, residents had to make the best of what they had at hand. By 1848, new technology in the form of steamboats came to the rescue for many coastal residents. When a hurricane approached, the steamboats' boilers were fired and the ships kept ready to escape upriver if necessary. In a letter to her mother, Helen Chapman described the storm that struck on September 17, 1848.
We left the mouth of the river in the midst of the storm, and it was well we did, for the wind blew so strong that there was great danger of an overflow. Steamboats were kept in readiness, and at the Brazos, all the houses were deserted, and everyone took to the boats. At Boca Chica, our friend Hugh McCarty was flooded out, and fled with his wife and children to the mouth of the river. Every house at these low places has been twice destroyed in these storms, and people have reason to fear.
150 years ago, the main city along this stretch of coast was not South Padre Island. It was the twin cities of Clarksville and Baghdad, located here at the mouth of the river, the Rio Grande. They had a combined population of over 30,000 people in 1865 before the end of the Civil War. Baghdad was a thriving shipping port, the last one to serve the Confederacy during the war. But in 1867, a huge hurricane struck the South Texas coast. With no way to predict storm movement, residents of Clarksville and Baghdad had little idea of the magnitude of the storm that was brewing. By the time they realized, it was too late. Today, this bottles one of the few traces that remain of these cities. They were completely wiped off the map.
The newspaper at the time, the Daily Ranchero, described the scene.
On Friday and Saturday, October 4th and 5th, the weather was intensely warm, especially for the season. No notice was given to prepare for such an emergency. The barometer gave but a feeble warning. Up to 8 o'clock, it was a storm only, but soon thereafter, evidence of a hurricane was unmistakable. Gust followed gust in rapid succession, each time with increasing violence. Trees began to be dismembered and crushed, buildings began to rock to and fro with every blast, and the rain came in sheets and dashes like the breaking of a furious sea over the prow of a stranded vessel. The strongest masonry yielded like reeds. Newly built tenements were taken up bodily into the air and wrenched into 1,000 fragments. Timbers were driven through brick walls as though fired from a cannon. The market house and hall were crushed. The courthouse and jail were leveled. The Rio Grande steamers moored under the banks were torn to atoms and launched to the bottom of the river. The lightning flashed incessantly, but no thunder could be heard. The rain mixed with dirt, filth, and debris came with the violence of hail. Thousands clung to the street posts with a life-and-death grasp. Others were behind fences, in gutters, or sheltered by the standing corner of some crushed house. Large numbers, however, fell or were blown down in the open lots and highways, and there remained for hours, clinging for life. Brazos, Santiago, Clarksville, Baghdad were blotted out.
South Texas has had a long history of hurricanes. Many times these powerful storms destroyed life and property, but occasionally they also brought relief from droughts. The following tracks show storms and hurricanes that have affected South Texas over the years. In 1933, South Texas was hit by 3 storms. The September storm killed 40 people, and winds in Brownsville were estimated at 124 miles per hour. Although there had been close calls with Hurricane Gilbert, Allen, and Bret, the last major storm to hit South Texas was Hurricane Beulah in 1967, exactly 100 years after the 1867 storm. Winds in Brownsville were estimated at 140 miles per hour. 18 people died.
Over the centuries, countless lives have been lost and cities destroyed by hurricanes. In fact, these powerful storms were so feared and revered that some cultures even worshiped them. The Mayans called their storm god Hunraken, the origins of the word hurricane. But how do these storms develop, and what exactly is a hurricane? To get the answers to these questions, we have to go to the experts.
A hurricane is a storm that forms over the tropical oceans, and it has sustained winds around a closed center of at least 74 miles an hour. The wind speeds can go much higher, but it takes at least 74 miles an hour to be a hurricane. There are a number of different names. They're all the same type of storm. In the Pacific, they're called typhoons. In the Indian Ocean, they are called cyclones. Of course, they're hurricanes in the tropical Atlantic, Gulf of Mexico, and Caribbean. And in Australia, for some reason or another, they call them willy willies, but it's all the same type of storm.
Whatever their name may be, it all means one thing: a violent storm with torrential rains and wind that can range from 74 to over 150 miles per hour. On average, hurricanes cause nearly $5 billion worth of damage each year in the United States alone. In September of 1999, over 3 million people fled the path of Hurricane Floyd, the largest evacuation ever in the history of the United States. Every year between June and November, countries all through Central America, the Caribbean, and the eastern and Gulf coasts of the United States face the threat of a hurricane. But where do these hurricanes come from?
The very initial, what we might call the seedling phase, would be what's called easterly waves, and these begin as low pressure areas over the hot deserts of Sahara and Africa. And they move off the west coast of Africa and move from the east toward the west, or toward the United States.